It started on a night so still that even the desert seemed to be holding its breath. No wind. No echo. Only a pale moon hanging above miles of silent dunes that stretched endlessly in every direction. The old radar station at Fort Mason hadn't picked up anything unusual for months, until exactly 2:37 a.m., when the monitors suddenly went white. The signal wasn't noise, it was a pulse, sharp and violent, like a heartbeat pounding through the wires. Sergeant Miller thought it was a system glitch, but before he could restart the console, every light in the room flickered out, and the temperature dropped so fast his breath turned to mist. Then came the sound, a deep, humming vibration that wasn't coming from outside or inside but from somewhere beneath the ground. When the power returned 30 seconds later, one of the radars showed a heat signature 10 miles north, right in the middle of the restricted desert zone, an area long abandoned after the failed nuclear tests of the 1970s. Colonel Harris was alerted. He arrived with a small response team within an hour, headlights cutting through the dust, engines echoing across the dunes. When they reached the coordinates, there was nothing but a smooth, circular patch of sand, so perfect it looked artificial, like glass poured and frozen mid-flow. The surface shimmered under the moonlight, reflecting distorted faces of the men staring at it. There was no crater, no debris, no smoke, nothing that could explain the reading. But every compass needle spun wildly, and the digital meters refused to stabilize. One of the soldiers, Private Lang, stepped onto the glassy area, and his boots made no sound at all. The air above the spot seemed thicker, as if invisible heat waves were bending reality itself. Harris ordered everyone to collect samples, but before anyone moved, Lang stopped. His body stiffened. He looked up at the moon with wide, unblinking eyes and whispered, "It's looking back." Then he collapsed. No pulse. No breath. His skin had turned ice cold, though the desert around him was still warm. They airlifted his body out immediately, but before the chopper reached the base, its instruments failed, and the pilot reported seeing flashes of light below the sand, as if something alive was moving just beneath the surface. Back at the site, Harris noticed faint impressions forming on the glassy area, shapes that weren't footprints but almost like handprints pressing upward from underneath. The men froze, listening, because the ground had begun to hum again, a low, rhythmic vibration that seemed to sync with their heartbeats. Then the radios picked up a frequency that none of their devices could transmit. It wasn't static, it was a voice, faint and distant, speaking in a language no one recognized. It didn't sound human, yet it carried a tone of warning, or invitation. Every attempt to record it failed, the audio files were corrupted instantly. When dawn finally came, the glassy circle was gone. Just smooth sand,
When Martin finally opened his eyes, the world was not the same. The ceiling above him was white, smooth, and lined with faint reflections of light that blinked rhythmically like a heartbeat. His throat felt dry, and every breath sounded like it came from somewhere far away, as if he were underwater. He blinked again, slower this time, trying to remember the last thing he had seen before everything went dark. A cold October night. Tires screeching. A flash of headlights. Then nothing. 19 years had passed since that moment, but to Martin, it felt like a single breath. He didn't know he had been asleep for almost 2 decades. He tried to move his hand, but the effort felt like lifting a mountain. His muscles resisted him, stiff and foreign. He turned his head slightly and saw a woman sitting beside his bed, older, her face carved with time, yet somehow familiar. She was crying silently, hands trembling as she reached out to touch his face. "Martin!" she whispered, her voice breaking like a fragile thread. He looked at her in confusion. "Who are you?" he asked weakly. The woman froze. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the steady beeping of the monitor. "I'm your wife," she finally said, her voice filled with both joy and heartbreak. "You've been asleep for 19 years. The words didn't make sense. 19 years? He wanted to laugh, but his voice caught in his throat. His mind raced, searching for a memory, any clue that could explain this impossible truth. But his last memory was still that night, the headlights, the crash, the silence. Now everything had changed. His wife, once in her 20s, was now a woman in her 40s. His own reflection in the small mirror by the bed showed an unfamiliar man. His hair was thinner, his face older, and his eyes sunken as though they carried the weight of all the years he had lost. He tried to sit up, but his body trembled violently. A nurse rushed in, gently holding him down. "Easy," she said softly. "Your body isn't ready yet." The room smelled of antiseptic and something faintly metallic. Machines surrounded him, each one humming a quiet tune of life. Through the window, the world outside was bright and fast, cars that didn't look like the ones he remembered, people staring at screens he had never seen before, buildings taller and sharper than his imagination could have built. It felt like waking up in the future. When the doctor came in, his tone was gentle but clinical. "Martin, you were in a car accident 19 years ago. You suffered a severe brain injury and fell into a coma. But somehow, your body never gave up." Martin's lips trembled. "And now? Now you're awake," the doctor said, almost in awe. "Against all odds." But being awake didn't mean being alive, not yet. Martin's world was a blur of faces he barely knew, voices that carried pieces of his past. His parents were gone. His younger brother was now a middle-aged man with children of his own. His wife told him stories. Weeks turned into months, and though Martin's body slowly began to remember how to live, his mind still wandered between the past and the present like a lost traveler trying to find home. Every morning, he woke to a world that felt slightly more familiar yet endlessly strange. The television spoke in a language he once knew but now filled with new words. Apps, AI, social media, things that meant nothing to the man who had fallen asleep in the early 2000s. He watched cars glide silently down the road, machines answering voices, and screens replacing faces. It was both fascinating and terrifying. But deeper than that confusion was the ache of knowing that the world had continued without him. He had once been a man with plans, a new job, a honeymoon, a life waiting to unfold. Now, all that waited for him was recovery. One morning, as light filtered through the hospital blinds, Martin's wife, Emily, placed a small box in his lap. Inside were photos, yellowed edges, frozen moments of laughter and love. "You should see what you missed," she said softly. His fingers trembled as he picked up a picture of their wedding day. They were both smiling, young and reckless, holding hands under a sky full of promise. Then another photo, his parents, who were gone now. Another, his brother, older, grayer, a stranger wearing his sibling's smile. Martin's chest tightened. Each photograph was like a window into a life he could see but never touch. "It's like watching someone else's story," he whispered. Emily smiled sadly. "It's still yours." But it didn't feel like it. When he looked in the mirror, he saw a man with 19 years of missing memories etched into his face. Sometimes he'd close his eyes and still feel the crash, the screeching tires, the blinding lights, the sound of shattering glass. The doctor told him these were phantom memories, fragments of trauma stitched into his subconscious. Yet to Martin, they were the only thing that felt real. His therapist encouraged him to write, to rebuild his timeline through words. So, with shaky hands, Martin began keeping a journal. "Day 1 of remembering," he wrote. "The world feels like a movie I wasn't invited to watch." He wrote about his frustration, about feeling like a ghost haunting a future that wasn't his. But as days passed, something inside him shifted. He began noticing the beauty in this new world, the way lights danced across glass buildings, the laughter of children chasing drones instead of kites, the kindness of strangers who had only known his name through newspaper headlines. The story of the man who woke up after 19 years had gone viral, and people sent him letters, gifts, even video messages. "You give us hope," one message said. "You're proof that miracles happen." But Martin didn't feel like a miracle. He felt like a man who had died and come back to find his life taken by time. One afternoon, Emily took him to their old house, the one she had kept after the accident. As he entered, the 41 days had passed since the storm swallowed her world. Tammy's face was pale, her lips dry and bleeding, her eyes sunken but still burning with determination. Her body was weak, but her spirit refused to surrender. The sea around her had become both her enemy and her home. Every sunrise was a reminder that she had survived another night, and every sunset tested her hope. She had learned to collect rainwater using a small piece of cloth and had mastered the rhythm of the waves to keep her battered yacht moving west. Sometimes she thought she heard Richard's voice whispering, "Keep going, Tam." It wasn't madness, it was survival. It was the echo of love that kept her alive. One morning, as she woke to the blinding light of the sun, she noticed something strange on the horizon. At first, she thought it was a mirage, a shimmer, a trick of light caused by exhaustion. She blinked again and again, but it didn't vanish. It was something solid. Something white. Her heart skipped a beat. She rubbed her eyes and whispered, "No, this can't be real." She reached for the binoculars she had found half broken below deck, and when she focused, her hands began to tremble. It was land. Real land. Her throat tightened with emotion as tears rolled down her salty cheeks. "Oh my God! I made it!" she whispered, her voice cracking. But the ocean wasn't going to let her reach it easily. The currents were strong, the yacht's steering was broken, and her energy was fading fast. She tied herself to the broken wheel, used the last bit of her strength to angle the sail, and prayed. The waves fought her, tossing her tiny boat like a toy, but she didn't let go. "I'm not dying here, not now!" she screamed at the sea as if challenging it. Hours later, the yacht scraped against something hard, coral. The shock threw her down, but she didn't care. She had reached the reef near Hilo, Hawaii. She untied herself, crawled to the deck, and jumped into the shallow water, barely able to stand. Every muscle screamed in pain, but her heart was pounding with joy. She dragged herself through the waves until her knees touched sand. When she finally collapsed on the shore, she laughed and cried at the same time. After 41 days lost at sea, she had survived. Locals found her lying unconscious, skin burnt, body frail, and lips whispering one name, Richard. They took her to a hospital where doctors couldn't believe how she had made it that far. When she finally woke up, the first thing she asked was, "Did they find him?" But they hadn't. Richard's body was never recovered. He had been taken by the same storm that spared her. The realization shattered her heart, yet she found peace in believing that his spirit had guided her home. Months later, when she recovered, Tammy went back to the ocean. People asked her why she would return to the same sea that had almost killed her. She simply said, "Because that's where I last saw him, and where I found myself." She repaired another boat,